The Nintendo Entertainment System is undeniably a huge part of gaming's history, but it's not perfect. In fact, it has a multitude of problems that can really impact how much enjoyment you get out of playing it today. A dodgy cartridge slot, blurry and scummy composite video output, monaural sound, and a lot of difficulty in making import software work correctly can put a lot of people off this classic system. Especially here in Europe when PAL and NTSC video formats and region locking get involved. And while, yes, you can get a system modded to get around some of these issues, the price of entry for a lot of mods is staggering and some of the things still aren't fixed. And sure, you can buy something like the Analog NT or Retron 5, but the former prizes the majority of people out, and with the latter you may as well emulate fully and bypass cartridges altogether. So what if you want something that works just like an original Nintendo, but better? Enter the AVS, brainchild of Brian from RetroUSB. The AVS doesn't use original Nintendo hardware like the old Analog NT was known to do before it ran out of parts, but instead it uses a field programmable gate array, or FPGA, solution. The result is near enough indistinguishable from authentic hardware and is free from any of the inaccuracies that come with emulation. So that means if your cartridge isn't clean, it will not play correctly, just like on a real system. Rocking an aesthetic that mimics the original NES almost to a T, it's clear to see the attention of detail we're dealing with from the start. Even the underside, which most people would never think to look at, holds a few homages to Nintendo's machine. Perfect recreations of the system's controller ports and power buttons complement the classic look with the correct feel, but not everything here is quite as it used to be. For one thing, the AVS is only about half the width of the old machine and a little smaller all around, not to mention its strange trapezoid form factor. Lifting up the front door reveals not one, but two cartridge slots. One front loading for North American and European games and one top load of Japanese Famicom titles. The latter of these is easy enough to use if not a bit tight, but the US slot at first seemed a bit fiddly and it almost seemed as if I was going to break it when I pushed cartridges in. I've gotten used to the amount of force it takes now, but it's something to bear in mind. Additionally, the door does look a bit silly hanging over the top of Famicom carts. Moving around to the back of the console, the biggest difference is immediately apparent: the HDMI port. The AVS upscales the internally rendered 240p image to a crisp 720p, exactly 3 times the resolution in total. And of course, since the picture isn't being pushed out of a poor quality composite port, it's free of all the usual blurring and artifacts that plague any stock NES. Additionally, the menu options, accessible via a mappable button combination, provide more customizable options for just how the image is handled. Pixel aspect allows you to stretch and squash the image as much as you like, with the left-hand side giving 1-to-1 square pixel mapping, the right filling most of the screen, and the middle filling a 4x3 sweet spot, which I find closest to how things looked on the original. Also available are some nice little bonuses, such as adjusting the vertical borders, scan lines of varying darkness levels, a boosted sprite limit, and the ability to hide a portion of the left side of the screen that often only holds garbled graphic data anyway. However, the colours do cause issues. The default colour palette is slightly questionable when compared directly to a real Nintendo's ones. It's nothing that should hugely impact your gaming experience, but for someone who's a stickler for accuracy, I prefer my visuals to look as authentic as possible. Thankfully, the latest beta firmware for the device fixes this issue and provides multiple options. I personally recommend the unsaturated V6 colour palette by Firebrand X, since it matches what I see coming from the composite jack on my Nintendo console the closest. Aside from the visuals, other features include a Famicom expansion port on the back for all the weird and wacky peripherals that entails, and 4 controller ports on the front that allow 4-player games to work without the need for a 4-score. The unit is also compatible with the Famicom disk system and any Japanese games with extra sound chips, although unfortunately I don't actually own any and have any way of testing that or showing you the functionality there. What I can show you though is the scoreboard program's functionality. The console's mini USB power socket also transfers data to and from a computer if connected, and is used to submit high scores to the Nintendo Age Forum's leaderboard. Or at least it would if any of my Power Region games were in the database. The number of titles supported is fairly limited, especially since this is such a niche product, but unless you're a major competitive freak or live in 1978 and still for some reason care about high scores, you really aren't missing much. It's not going to impact your gameplay. So what's my overall verdict? The RetroUSB AVS is definitely a worthy contender for getting high quality picture from real NES cartridges, and it works well for playing any cartridge from any region. However, the last issue to be raised is the price point. It's very difficult to justify spending $185 on a souped up 80s console, and that's not even including delivery or customs charges. While it's not quite as premium as the Analog NT's $500 charge, it's still not something for the average consumer and more for fanatics of this kind of thing. But for me personally, it's actually replaced my Nintendo for day-to-day use, and unlike most clone consoles, this definitely feels as good if not better than the authentic experience. I don't regret buying the AVS whatsoever, and I would recommend you pick one up if you want one of the best ways to play the classic 8-bit games out there.